The red lights hit Lyra Chun like a slap to the face. She had been dreaming about Earth again. About the wheat fields of her childhood home swaying in the summer wind. When the sirens tore her from sleep and threw her into a nightmare, emergency klaxons screamed through the walls of her tiny cabin aboard the Vagrant Star. A sound she had heard only twice in 6 years of hauling cargo through the outer territories. She rolled out of her bunk and hit the cold metal floor with bare feet. Her heart pounding so hard she could feel it in her throat. Red alert meant danger. Real danger. The kind that got people. Killed. Lyra grabbed her flight suit from the hook near her bed and pulled it on with practiced speed while her mind raced through every possible scenario. Pirates were rare in this sector, but not unheard of. Engine failure could trigger red alert if the reactor went critical. Maybe they had drifted into a debris field or crossed into restricted space without realizing. And none of those explanations prepared her for what she found. When she stumbled onto the bridge, her co-pilot, Tessic, was standing at the communication console with his green scales, pale and his 4 eyes wide with something that looked like pure terror. The Vralian had served with her for 3 years, and she had never seen him afraid of anything. What is happening? Lyra demanded as she moved to the main display. Commander, Tessic said in a voice that trembled. You need to see this. He brought up the scanner display, and Lyra felt her stomach. Dropships were appearing on their sensors. Not 1 or 2, but dozens of them, all bearing the distinctive energy signatures of HFY. Hegemony military vessels, destroyers and cruisers and hunter-killer packs were converging on their position from every direction, like predators closing in on wounded prey. That cannot be right. Lyra whispered. I have checked it 5 times. Tessic replied. There are 18 warships and more arriving every minute. The communication panel lit up with incoming transmissions. Not just from the approaching fleet, but from relay stations and patrol vessels across 3 systems. Every CHNNEL was broadcasting the same message in cold official tones. All vessels in Sector 7 are ordered to intercept the human freighter, designated Vagrant Star, and hold for hegemony security forces. Lethal force is authorized. The human ship is carrying contraband of the highest classification. Do not allow it to escape. Lyra stared at the display as more and more red dots appeared, each one representing a warship with enough firepower to turn her freighter into scattered atoms. What contraband? She said. We are hauling agricultural equipment and medical supplies. Nothing else. They are hailing us directly, Tessic said. The main screen flickered and a face appeared that made Lyra's blood run cold. Fleet Commander Voss was a legend among the hegemony military. A warrior caste officer who had crushed rebellions and hunted pirates across a dozen systems. His gray face was hard as stone, and his violet eyes held no mercy. Human. Voss said, You are harboring stolen property belonging to the HFY hegemony. Surrender it immediately, and you will be allowed to continue on your way. Resist, and you will be destroyed. I do not know what you are talking about. Lyra replied honestly. My cargo manifest is registered and legal. You can scan us yourself. We already have, Voss said. The bioscanners do not lie. Human. There's a HFY life sign aboard your vessel that should not exist. Hand over the abomination or face the consequences. The transmission ended. Lyra turned to Tessic with confusion written across her face. A HFY life sign. How is that possible? I do not know. Tessic said. We have been in deep space for weeks. No one has come aboard. But even as he spoke, Lyra was already moving toward the cargo bay. Something was wrong. Something was very wrong. And she needed to find out what before 18. Warships turned their ship into a debris cloud. The cargo bay was dark and cold and filled with rows of shipping containers. Stacked 3 high. Lyra moved through the narrow aisles with a scanner in one hand and a light in the other, sweeping the beam across every shadow. "Come out," she called. "I know someone is here. I am not going to hurt you." She heard it then. A small sound from behind a stack of crates near the rear wall. It was the sound of breathing. Quick and frightened like a small animal trying to hide from a predator, Lyra moved closer and shone her light into the gap between two containers. What she saw made her stop dead. A child was huddled in the darkness, wrapped in a torn thermal blanket that she must have found in one of the emergency kits. She was Vethkai. That much was obvious from her gray skin and large violet eyes. But she was tiny, maybe 6 cycles old by their standards. The girl clutched a half-eaten ration bar in one small hand and looked up at Lyra with an expression of pure terror. "Please," the child whispered in broken common. "Please do not let them take me." Lyra lowered herself slowly until she was at eye level with the girl. "Who are you?" she asked gently. "How did you get on my ship?" "I hid," the girl said. "In one of the boxes when they loaded cargo. I had to run away." "I had to run away from what?" The child's eyes filled with tears and her small body began to shake. "They want to unmake me," she said. "The priests said I'm wrong, that my blood is wrong. They said I have to be dissolved so I do not spread the sickness." Lyra felt something cold settle in her chest. She had heard rumors about the hegemony's genetic purity laws, about the way they dealt with those who did not fit their rigid caste system. But she had never believed the stories could be true. "What is your name?" Lyra asked. "Kira," the girl said. "My mother called me Kira before they took her away." Outside the ship, 18 warships were closing in with weapons armed and orders to kill inside. A human woman knelt in front of a terrified child and made a decision that would change everything. "Okay, Kira," Lyra said softly. "I am going to help you." She did not know yet what that promise would cost her. She did not know that her decision would spark a crisis that would shake the foundations of galactic politics. All she knew was that a child was afraid and alone, and that she could not turn her over to people who wanted to kill her for the crime of being born. Different. Lyra stood and held out her hand after a long moment. Kira took it together. They walked back toward the bridge while the red alert sirens continued to scream, and the fleet drew ever closer. The chase was about to begin. Tessic stared at the child with all 4 of his eyes, and Lyra could see the fear in his face. "Commander," he said slowly, "do you understand what you have done?" "I have decided to protect the child." Lyra replied, "That is what I understand. She is not just a child." Tessic said, "She is marked for unmaking. The hegemony does not send 18 warships for ordinary refugees. Whatever she is, they consider her a threat to their entire civilization." Kira had pressed herself against Lyra's leg and was watching the Vralian with wide, frightened eyes. Lyra put a protective hand on the girl's shoulder. "She is 6 years old." Lyra said, "How dangerous can she possibly be?" The answer came not from Tessic, but from the communication console. A new transmission had arrived, this one bearing the seal of the Hegemony Genetic Authority. And as Lyra read the contents, she began to understand why an entire fleet was hunting one small girl. The document was a termination order, cold and clinical in its language subject designation. Kira 7 Null was identified at birth as carrying genetic markers consistent with the old pattern, a mutation that had not appeared in the Vethkai species for 10,000 years. The old pattern was described as a catastrophic genetic anomaly that disrupted caste determination protocols. In simple terms, Kira's DNA did not contain the markers that told a Vethkai what they were supposed to be. She was not a worker or a warrior or a thinker or a ruler. She was nothing and everything, and the hegemony did not know how to classify her. That terrified them. "I do not understand," Lyra said. "So she does not fit into a caste?" Why does that mean she has to die? Tessic made a sound that might have been her bitter laugh. You are human, he said. Your species never divided itself by blood. You cannot understand what this means to the Vethkai. He pulled up a historical database on one of the secondary screens. 10,000 years ago, the Vethkai were like you. Chaotic and undifferentiated. They fought endless wars among themselves and nearly destroyed their civilization. Then the architects came to power and created the caste system. The screen showed images of Vethkai society as it existed now. Rigid and ordered, with every individual knowing their exact place and purpose from birth. They engineered their own species. Tessic continued. Over hundreds of generations they bred themselves into perfect categories. Warriors who could only fight, workers who could only build, thinkers who could only create, and rulers who controlled everything. That sounds like slavery, Lyra said. To you, perhaps? To them, it is salvation. The caste system ended their wars and built their empire. It gave them stability and purpose, but it only works if everyone accepts their place. Tessic looked at Kira with something like pity in his eyes. The old pattern is what they were before. It is the genetic memory of freedom, of being able to become anything. If it spreads, it could undo everything the architects created. Kira spoke then in a small voice. My mother said I was special, she said. She said my blood was a gift, not a curse. She said the old ways were not wrong, just different. What happened to your mother? Lyra asked gently. The priests came when I was very small. Kira said they tested my blood and found the pattern. They said I had to be dissolved before I could have children and spread the sickness. Tears ran down the girl's gray cheeks. My mother and father hid me. They moved from city to city to keep me safe, but the priests always found us. Finally, my father put me in a cargo container and told me to stay quiet no matter what. And your parents? Lyra asked, though she already knew the answer. The soldiers took them. Kira whispered. I heard my mother screaming as the ship flew away. Lyra knelt down and pulled the girl into her arms. She thought about her own childhood on Earth, about the freedom she had taken for granted, the ability to dream of being anything she wanted. She had grown up on a farm but had chosen to study the stars. She had trained as a scientist but had become a pilot. She had served in the Navy but had walked away to become a trader. Every choice had been hers to make. Kira would never have that chance. If the hegemony caught her, she would be dissolved. Her genetic material broken down and recycled. Her potential erased, as if she had never existed at all, because she carried the possibility of being free. Tessic, Lyra said as she stood. Plot a course for the Terran border. The Varillian scales went pale. Commander, that is 3 days away at maximum speed. We cannot outrun a battle fleet for 3 days. Then we had better start now. This is madness, Tessic said. The hegemony will destroy us. They will not let her escape. She represents everything they fear. I know, Lyra said. That is exactly why we have to try. She walked to the pilot's console and began entering commands. I grew up hearing stories about what makes humans different, she said. We are not the strongest species or the smartest or the most advanced, but we survived and spread across the stars because we refused to accept limits. The engines hummed as they powered up to full capacity. The Vethkai built their civilization on the idea that everyone has a fixed place and purpose. That is their strength, but it is also their weakness. They cannot imagine someone doing something they were not designed to do. Lyra smiled grimly. I was designed to be a farmer. Let us show them what a farmer can do when she decides to be something else. The vagrant star surged forward into the darkness of space. Behind them, 18 warships adjusted their courses and began the pursuit the chase had begun. Kira watched through the viewport as the stars stretched into lines and the ship jumped to faster than light speed. Can we really escape? She asked. Lyra looked down at The girl who carried 10,000 years of forbidden freedom in her blood. I do not know. She admitted, but I promise you this. I will not stop trying until we are safe, or until there is nothing left of me to try. It was a promise that would be tested in ways Lyra could not yet imagine. The hegemony was coming, and they would not stop until they had erased every trace of the old pattern from the universe. But they had never hunted a human before. They did not know what they were dealing with. The next 46 hours would become legend in the outer territories. Spacers and traders and pirates would tell the story for generations. The tale of how a single human freighter captain outran the most powerful military force in the sector. With nothing but courage and creativity and a refusal to give up, it began in the Kestrel Nebula, where Lyra made her first impossible move. The hegemony fleet had spread out in a standard pursuit formation, a net of warships designed to cut off every possible escape route. Their tactical computers had calculated every trajectory the vagrant star could take and positioned vessels to intercept each one. They had not calculated that Lyra would fly directly into the nebula itself. The Kestrel was a graveyard of dying stars, a swirling mass of radiation and electromagnetic storms that scrambled sensors and fried navigation systems. No sane pilot would enter it voluntarily. Lyra was not feeling particularly sane. Commander, the radiation levels will cook us in less than an hour, Tessic warned as the ship plunged into the glowing clouds. Then we had better be out in less than an hour, Lyra replied. She flew by instinct through the chaos, dodging pockets of intense radiation and threading between collapsing magnetic fields. The hegemony ships hesitated at the edge of the nebula, their commanders unwilling to risk their vessels in the maelstrom. By the time they decided to follow, the vagrant star had emerged on the other side with half its sensors fried, but still flying. That bought them 6 hours. Second escape came near the Thornback asteroid field. The hegemony had anticipated Lyra's course and positioned a hunter-killer squadron directly in her path. 3 fast attack ships with enough firepower to reduce the freighter to atoms. Lyra did not try to run. Instead, she flew straight at them. What are you doing? Tessic screamed as the attack ships opened fire. Trust me, Lyra said. She pushed the vagrant star into a dive that the ship was never designed to make, dropping below the plane of the asteroid field and using a massive spinning rock as cover. The hunter-killers followed, confident in their superior speed and weapons. They did not see the second asteroid until it was too late. Lyra had noticed something the hegemony computers had missed: the gravitational interaction between 2 large asteroids that was about to send one of them tumbling into a new orbit. She timed her maneuver perfectly, slingshotting around the first asteroid just as the second came crashing through the space. Where the hunter-killers were flying, 2 of the 3 ships were destroyed instantly. Third was damaged and fell behind. That bought them another 8 hours. The third escape was pure desperation. The hegemony fleet had finally cornered the vagrant star near a binary star system, blocking every route to the Terran border fleet. Commander Voss himself hailed them with triumph in his voice. You have run well, human, he said, but the chase is over. Surrender the abomination, and I will grant you a quick death. I have a better idea, Lyra replied. She cut the transmission and turned to Tessic. How close can we get to those stars without burning up? The Vrelian looked at her like she had lost her mind. You cannot be serious. Answer the question. The outer corona, perhaps, but the radiation would be lethal within minutes. What about if we vented the cargo bay and used the freight containers as ablative shielding? Tessic's 4 eyes went wide as he understood what she was planning. That might work, he admitted, but the margin for error would be measured in seconds. Then I had better not make any errors. Lyra activated the ship-wide intercom. Kira, she said, I need you to come to the bridge right now and strap yourself in tight. The little girl arrived moments later, and Lyra lifted her into the co-pilot seat. This is going to be scary. Lyra told her, but I need you to be brave for me. Can you do that? Kira nodded solemnly. My mother said that. Being brave means being scared but doing the right thing anyway. Your mother was very wise. Lyra turned back to her controls and began the most dangerous maneuver of her life. The Vagrant Star dove toward the binary stars with the hegemony fleet. In pursuit, as they approached the blazing corona, Lyra activated the cargo bay release and sent tons of freight containers tumbling into space behind them. The containers absorbed the worst of the radiation and created a cloud of debris that confused the enemy sensors. Then Lyra did something impossible. She flew between the two stars, threading a needle of survivable space less than a kilometer wide at speeds that should have torn the ship apart. The hegemony ships could not follow there. Tactical computers refused to even calculate the trajectory, classifying it as suicide with a probability of success too low to measure. But Lyra was not following tactical computers. She was following her instincts. The accumulated wisdom of a lifetime of making choices that did not fit into neat categories. She was a farmer who had become a scientist, who had become a soldier, who had become a traitor, who had become a rebel. She was human. The Vagrant Star emerged from between the stars with its hull glowing red and its engines failing, but somehow still intact. Kira was crying, and Tessic was praying to gods he did not believe in, but they were alive, and the Terran border was only 12 hours away. How did you do that? Tessic asked in a voice that shook with disbelief. Lyra laughed, a sound of exhaustion and relief, and something that might have been joy. I did not follow the rules, she said. The hegemony expects everyone to behave according to their programming. Warriors fight like warriors, pilots fly like pilots, freighters run like freighters. She looked at her burned and battered console with something like affection. I am not a warrior or a pilot or a freighter captain. I am all of those things, and none of them. I am whatever I need to be in the moment. She reached over and squeezed Kira's small hand. That is what the old pattern really means, she said. It is not a sickness or an abomination. It is the freedom to become anything. Kira looked up at her with those enormous violet eyes. Is that what humans are? She asked. Free. We try to be, Lyra said. We do not always succeed, but we never stop trying. Behind them, the hegemony fleet regrouped and resumed the pursuit. They were battered and confused, but they were not giving up. The final confrontation was coming, and everything would depend on whether the Terran Republic believed that one small girl was worth going to war for. The Terran border was marked by nothing more than an invisible line in space, a boundary defined by treaties and agreements that existed only because enough people believed in them. Lyra could see it on her navigation display, a glowing marker that represented safety and freedom and everything she had been fighting for. It was so close she could almost taste it, but Fleet Commander Voss had learned from his mistakes. The hegemony fleet had pushed ahead at maximum speed, cutting off the Vagrant Star's approach to the border. 18 warships formed a wall of death between Lyra and her destination, their weapons charged and ready. Human, Voss said over the communication channel. You have impressed me. No prey has ever run so far or so well. But the chase ends here. Lyra's fingers tightened on her controls. The Vagrant Star was falling apart around her, its engines running on fumes and its hull held together by emergency patches. They had no weapons worth mentioning, and no tricks left to play. Give me the abomination, Voss continued, and I will let you and your crew live. I will even provide a letter of commendation for your piloting skills. You could have a future in the hegemony with talents like yours. I am not interested in your future. Lyra replied, I have my own. Then you will die for nothing. Your government will not risk war for one defective alien child. The Terran Republic is too young and too weak to challenge us. Lyra looked at Kira, who was still strapped into the co-pilot seat, The girl had been so brave through everything, never complaining even when the ship had nearly torn itself apart between the binary stars. Now she was watching Lyra with absolute trust in her eyes. Faith that this strange human woman would somehow find a way to save her. Lyra wished she deserved that faith. What happens now? Tessic asked quietly. Do we surrender? Before Lyra could answer, an alarm blared on her console. New contacts were appearing on sensors, emerging from faster-than-light travel directly between the vagrant star and the hegemony fleet. Lyra stared at the display in disbelief. 12 ships had arrived bearing the distinctive signatures of Terran Republic military vessels. At their head was the biggest warship Lyra had ever seen, a Dreadnought-class battleship bristling with weapons and radiating power. TSS Indomitable had come to the border. All vessels stand down. A woman's voice cut across every communication channel. This is Admiral Sarah Okonkwo of the Terran Republic Navy. You have entered sovereign Terran space. Withdraw immediately or be fired upon. Admiral Voss replied with barely concealed anger. We are in pursuit of a criminal who has stolen property belonging to the hegemony. This is an internal matter that does not concern your republic. That criminal is a child, Okonkwo said, and she has requested asylum in Terran space. That makes it very much our concern. There was a long pause. Lyra held her breath as the two fleets faced each other across the invisible line that separated peace from war. You cannot be serious, Voss said finally. You would risk everything for one worthless mutation. She has no caste, no purpose, no value to anyone. She is nothing. She is not nothing to us, Okonkwo replied. The hegemony will not tolerate this interference. We have 5 times your military strength. We could crush your republic in a matter of months, perhaps, Okonkwo admitted, but you would lose ships in the process. Lots of ships, and while you were busy crushing us, your rivals would be watching, waiting for you to weaken. She paused to let that sink in. Is one child really worth destabilizing your entire empire? Fleet Commander Voss's face twisted with fury. She is not just a child. She is a contagion. The old pattern could spread through our population and undo 10,000 years of progress. You do not understand what you are protecting. I understand perfectly, Okonkwo said. You are afraid of her because she represents choice. She proves that your perfect genetic order is not as inevitable as you claim. That your people could be free if they wanted to be. Freedom is chaos, Voss spat. It leads to war and destruction and suffering. We learned that lesson millennia ago, and yet here we are, Okonkwo said calmly. A species that never bred itself into cages, that lets its people choose their own paths. We have our share of chaos and war and suffering, but we also have art and music and science and love. We have people who were born to be farmers and became admirals. People who were designed for nothing and became everything. She leaned forward in her command chair. That little girl on that freighter has something your entire civilization has forgotten how to want. She has potential, the ability to become anything she chooses. And that is worth protecting. You are fools, Voss said. Sentimental fools who will doom yourselves for meaningless ideals. Maybe, Okonkwo admitted, but those meaningless ideals are what make us human. Now withdraw your fleet or find out what happens when you threaten something we actually care about. The standoff lasted 11 minutes of silence while weapons locked and targeting computers calculated, and every soul on both sides of the border held their breath. Then slowly, one by one, the hegemony ships began to turn away. Fleet Commander Voss glared at the view screen one last time. This is not over, he said. The abomination will never be safe. We will find a way to reclaim what is ours. You can try, Okonkwo replied, but she is under our protection now, and we do not give up on our own. The transmission ended. The hegemony fleet retreated back across the border. their weapons powering down as they disappeared into the darkness on the bridge of the Vagrant. Star Lyra finally allowed herself to breathe. Tessic was laughing with relief, and Kira was crying, but this time the tears were happy ones. Commander Chun. Admiral Okonkwo's voice came over the com. Please proceed to the Indomitable. We have a lot to discuss, and I believe there is a young lady who could use a warm meal and a safe place to sleep. Copy that, Admiral, Lyra managed to say, and thank you. I did not think anyone would come. We almost did not, Okonkwo admitted. The Senate was afraid of provoking the hegemony. But then we received your distress signal and saw what you were carrying. There was warmth in her voice when she continued. Oh, child being hunted for the crime of being born free. That is not something we could ignore. That is not something we could ever ignore. Lyra looked down at Kira. Did you hear that? She asked. You are safe. Now, Kira reached up and took Lyra's hand in both of hers. Thank you, she whispered. Thank you for not giving up. I could never give up on you. Lyra said, you are worth fighting for. The Vagrant Star limped toward the Indomitable while the stars watched. In silent witness, a line had been drawn in the darkness of space, and for the first time in 10,000 years, the hegemony had been forced to acknowledge that some things were more powerful than genetic destiny. Things like hope and courage, and the stubborn human belief that every life has value. The war was not over, but the first battle had been won. 6 months had passed since the standoff at the border. Kira stood at the window of her new home and watched the sun set over the green hills of New Geneva, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple that she had never seen before. On her homeworld, the sky had always been gray, a uniform color that matched the uniform lives of everyone who lived beneath it. Here, on Earth, everything was different. The house was small but warm, nestled in a valley where wildflowers grew in chaotic profusion and birds sang songs that had no pattern or purpose except beauty. Her foster parents were kind people who asked nothing of her except that she eat her vegetables and do her homework and be happy. They did not care about her blood or her caste, or the genetic markers that made her an abomination. In the eyes of the hegemony, they only cared that she was a child who needed a home. The door opened behind her and Kira turned to see a familiar figure standing in the entrance. Lyra Chen looked different from the desperate freighter captain who had risked everything to save her. She wore civilian clothes now, and her hair had grown longer, and there was a peace in her eyes that had not been there during those terrifying days of running. I brought you something, Lyra said. She held out a small case, and when Kira opened it, she found a set of watercolor paints and brushes. You remembered, Kira said softly. Of course I remembered. During the long hours of the chase, Lyra had found Kira hiding in the cargo bay with nothing to do but wait and be afraid. She had given the girl her own old paint set and shown her how to create pictures on scraps of paper, how to mix colors and make shapes that came from imagination rather than instruction. It had been a small thing, a distraction from the terror. But Kira had never forgotten. I have been practicing, Kira said. She led Lyra to a small room that her foster parents had converted into a studio. The walls were covered with paintings, dozens of them in every color and style. There were landscapes of places Kira had never seen, portraits of people she had met since coming to Earth, abstract swirls of emotion that had no name but felt true anyway. These are beautiful, Lyra said with wonder in her voice. I do not know if they are good, Kira admitted. There is no caste for art where I come from. No one taught me the proper way to do it. There is no proper way, Lyra said. That is the whole point. You create what you feel, and it is right because it came from you. Kira considered this for a moment. The hegemony says, I am an abomination, she said. A mistake that should not exist. They say the old pattern is a sickness that will destroy everything they have built. What do you think? Lyra asked. Kira walked to her easel where a painting was still in progress. It showed a small rabbit running across an endless green field. The same image from the children's book that Lyra had shown her during those desperate hours aboard the Vagrant Star. But this version was different. The rabbit was not alone. Behind it were other animals. Dozens of them, all different shapes and sizes and colors, all running together toward a horizon that glowed with golden light. I think, Kira said carefully, that being able to choose what you become is not a sickness. I think it is a gift. She turned to face Lyra with eyes that held no fear. I think the hegemony is afraid because they forgot how to dream. They made themselves into machines that could only do one thing. And now they cannot imagine being anything else. That is very wise for someone your age, Lyra said. I have had good teachers. They stood together in silence for a moment. The human woman and the alien child, whose lives had become intertwined by fate and choice and the stubborn refusal to accept injustice. I have something else to tell you. Lyra said finally. The Senate passed the potential doctrine yesterday. It means that the Republic will offer sanctuary to anyone being persecuted for the circumstances of their birth. Kira's eyes went wide. Anyone. Anyone. Lyra confirmed. There are already refugees arriving from hegemony space. Not just Vethkai, but other species too. People who were told they could only be one thing and wanted to be something more. Because of me, because of you, Lyra said, your story spread across the galaxy. Everyone heard about the little girl who carried freedom in her blood and the human freighter captain who defied an empire to save her. She smiled. You are famous now. Kira, you are a symbol of everything the hegemony fears and everything we believe in. Kira thought about this for a long time. In the hegemony, she had been marked for death because she represented a threat to the established order. Here she was celebrated because she represented hope. It was strange to think that she had not changed at all. Only the way people saw her. I want to help them, Kira said finally. The others who are coming. The ones who are scared and alone like I was. I want them to know that it gets better. I think you will. Lyra said, I think you will help more people than you can imagine. She put her arm around Kira's small shoulders. But first you need to finish growing up. You need to go to school and make friends and figure out who you want to be. Not because someone tells you to, but because you choose it for yourself. Is that what humans do? That is what everyone should do, Lyra said. It is what every sentient being deserves. The chance to discover their own potential. Outside the window, the sun had set, and the stars were coming out somewhere. Among those distant lights, the hegemony was still watching, still planning, still afraid of the revolution that one small girl had sparked. They had spent 10,000 years building a civilization based on the idea that freedom was dangerous, that people needed to be controlled for their own good. No, that idea was crumbling across the galaxy. Beings were asking questions that had been forbidden for generations. Why should blood determine destiny? Why should birth define worth? Why should anyone accept limits that others impose on them? The old pattern was spreading, not through genetics, but through something more powerful, through hope, through the simple, revolutionary idea that every living creature has the right to become whatever they dream of being. Kira picked up her paintbrush and added one more detail to her painting. Small figures standing at the front of the running animals, leading them toward the golden horizon. It did not look like a rabbit or a Vethkai or a human. It looked like possibility itself. Thank you, Kira said to Lyra, for everything. Thank you, Lyra replied, for reminding us what we are fighting for. She kissed the top of Kira's head and walked to the door. I have to go now. The Navy gave me a new ship, and there are more refugees who need help. But I will visit whenever I can. Promise. I promise. Lyra paused at the threshold and looked back one last time. Remember what I told you that first night. Kira, you can be anything. Then she was gone. Kira stood alone in her studio, surrounded by paintings that no one had taught her to create, expressing feelings that no one had programmed her to feel. She was an abomination. She was a refugee. She was a symbol. She was a child. She was free. And somewhere in the darkness between the stars, a new era was dawning. An age of choice and change and limitless potential. It had begun with one small girl who refused to accept that her blood was her destiny. It would end with the stars themselves transformed, but that is a story for another time. For now, it was enough to stand at the window and watch the night sky and know that tomorrow held infinite possibilities. The seed of freedom had been planted, and it was already beginning to grow.